Hello, everyone. I'm back, and today I will be taking some time to talk about the Creation Week. And I'm gonna start a little series here where I will discuss certain biblical topics that deal with science or even archaeology. And I'll probably post videos like every other week. Last time I did a little follow up on my flood podcast I did with Southside Church of Christ, and I did it with our preacher Kyle Blevins. I'm gonna be doing it with him, and I'm gonna be doing my own little series with just me talking. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, you probably need. It'll be best if you read Genesis 1 through 2. That encompasses the Creation Week. And this can branch off into several different videos or topics, but I'm going to be going over just the Creation Week. And let's get started. Sure, a lot of you guys watching are probably familiar with Creation Week, Genesis 1 through 2. And we all know Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And you got 7 days, which make up our day, a week. And we got the beginning Sunday and the end Saturday. And we all know that before God created the earth and the heavens, it was just Him. It was just God. It wasn't nothing or anyone else. But, it is agreed on that God created angels or angelic beings before He did humans, and that they would have been witnesses to the creation of the earth. And we read, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He created night. And there was evening and morning the first day." We read that on day 1, He created morning and evening, and He also created energy. When God says God created the light. And notice how it says, the whole chapter says, after like a particular day, there was evening and morning, signifying that these were literal 24-hour days. And on day 1, we get day and night. That's where we get our days and nights at, 12 hours each, which make up a 24-hour day. And day 2, God says, let there be a vault from between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God created the vault, sky, and there was the evening, and there was morning. Again, there's morning and evening. And, God created the sky, and there's this guy in particular, he's an apologist, Kent Hovind. I'll link one of his videos he does on the Garden of Eden. And he's not the only one who thinks this, but, what day 2 is talking about is God created this ice or water canopy above in the atmosphere. And I don't know the full in-depth explanation of how this would have worked, but it would be believed that it didn't rain before the flood, like I discussed earlier in my last video. So how are the plants? How's everyone going to survive if there's not rainwater? Because that's essential for like plant growth and things in general. Moist soil, and it kind of keeps the temperature in balance, because if there's no rain for a long time, it'll just everything will become real dry, and dryness usually leads to forest fires, as we've seen not too long ago with Australia and California. So I'll link his video on the Garden of Eden in the description, which you can look more into it in that video. And I'll probably I'll post a few other of my sources where I get this information from. And we go on to day 3. Let there be that's day 2. Let the water under the sky gathered in to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God created the dry ground, land, and he gathered the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Day 3, God created dry land, which would become our continents. And before the continents came to being, the earth was covered in water. And when the continents came into play, the water left would have been our oceans, our 7 oceans. And in day 1 through 3, God would have created matter and energy. Like in day 1, he created energy, and 2 and 3, he created the matter of the earth. And also on day 3, we see that God created, the vegetation. And let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it, according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and then there was morning, the 3rd day. And you notice that the word kind is used a lot, and I'll get into that topic here in a little bit. But I forgot to mention that the Hebrew word yom, which is where the word day would have been translated from. A lot of people like to say that, yom can mean, it does mean a literal 24-hour day, but it can also mean, a vast period of time too. Think about it when you say, in the days of Abraham, for example. The word yom would have been translated for the days. We would have got days from yom. But, if there's always a number assigned to it, they're literal days in Scripture. And the creation week is, it's followed up by like day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on. And on day 4, God created the sun, the stars, and the moon. He refers to the moon as the lesser light. And a lot of us know that when we see the moon, it's actually a reflection off of the sun. And a lot of us probably wonder, we may find it odd, why did God create the sun, the moon, and stars after he created the vegetation? And another thing, this is real important in saying that they were literal days. There's a bunch of people called theistic evolutionists. They like to fit evolution in the creation week. And there's, we can go on to that topic more in depth, but for now I'm just going to keep it on the creation week. And the problem with fitting the evolutionary time frame in with the creation week is there's several problems. Later on, I'll probably discuss, problems with the theory of evolution itself, not just the evolution in Scripture, but they like to say each day represents eons of time or something, and day 3 and day 4 cannot possibly be millions of years because plants cannot go millions of years without sunlight, because the sun is essential for them producing photosynthesis, and that's how they produce their food. And consumers, herbivorous animals, they get the energy, the glucose that's produced during photosynthesis, they get it from the plants, and then the carnivorous creatures, they get it from the herbivorous creatures, and so on and so forth. And then that's one big problem with fitting the evolutionary time frame into 6 day creation week. And on day 5, let the water. Oh, forgot about this. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from night, and let them serve as signs to mark your sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights on the vault of the sky and give light on the earth." And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in vault of the sky and light on the earth to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And there God saw it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 4th day. I should have probably read the account before I got into talking about, the sun, the moon, and the stars being created on day 4. But, we also read that they serve to mark sacred times. And, that was also the time where we get the, 24-hour day. That would have been assigned on day 4. And day 5. Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living things with which the water teems, and that moves about in it, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the 5th day. So, to be short, God created the sea creatures and the birds. I'm going to go ahead and say that Moses, or people, or anyone up until the 18th century did not have the same animal classification as we do now, the Carl Linnaeus' taxonomy. So a lot of people, this could be for a future video on Jonah. In Jonah, it says he was swallowed by a fish, but Jesus said he was swallowed by a whale. And people think, well, which one was he swallowed by? And they say there's a contradiction because, well, whales and fish are not the same. But you got to remember, Whales weren't classified as mammals until the 18th century, so the people of the day would have thought whales to be fish. And fish was kind of a broad category for any type of sea creature, whether they be mammalian like whales or dolphins or porpoises, and so on. And another thing, bats. A lot of people like to say that the Bible is filled with scientific error, which we can discuss later. And one of them saying that, Moses said that bats and birds are the same thing. And again, bats weren't classified as. They knew they were different, but they didn't, classify bats as mammalian. Back then, it wasn't until a few hundred years ago that they were now. And bats would have been classified as flying creatures, which bird was a broad categorization for flying creatures. And a lot of people, and I'm going to say this: flightless birds would have probably been made on day 6, which is when land animals were created. I'm going to go ahead and read that account now. Then God said, look, wrong one. Let the land produce living creatures according to their kind, and livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its own kind, and it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds, and God saw that it was good. Again, I'll talk more in depth about the kinds here in a few minutes. But we got our land creatures created, which would have been, that would have been mammals, even flightless birds, and reptiles, and amphibians, and flightless insects, and any animals that walk on land were created on day 6, and flying creatures, which would be insects plus birds, and bats would have been created on day 5. And we also read on day 6, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, over the creatures that move along the ground. We read that humans are special in that we're the stewards of the earth. We're, in a way, practically in charge of the earth. I mean, that means when it comes to, the role of the earth, when it comes to plants, animals, and humans, we're the stewards. We're the kind of the overseers, if you understand what I mean. And we read that God created them in His image, which would reference that God created us humans in His image, meaning that we have spirits. God is God Father and God Son and God Spirit are pure spiritual forms. They have no physical attributes to them, and angels and demons are also spiritual beings too. We can get more on that later or sometime. And God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created them, male and female. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God says, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit within it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, Everything that has breath on it, I give every plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made and saw that it was very good. And there was evening and morning the sixth day. Alright, and notice how it said that animals that move on ground, meaning that animals were classified as, land dwelling and air dwelling and sea dwelling, is how the people of the day would have classified animals. No, they don't go on modern taxonomy, where mammal, fish, insect, reptile, and amphibian, But, we'll go on to chapter 2. I'm going to go ahead and say this. A lot of people will fight you saying that Genesis 1 and 2 are two different creation accounts and that they contradict each other, and we'll get onto that here in a second. But and 7, I forgot to mention this. There was 6 actual creation days, and day 7 was when God rested. So there was 6 days of creation and 1 rest day for God. All right. And in Genesis chapter 2, it's where Adam and Eve are introduced, and we all know that. All right. And another thing, I'm reading out of NIV, New International Version. And God gave Adam the duty of, naming all land-dwelling animals. It's thought that he didn't name every single animal kind, but, just land-dwelling. And I forgot to mention this. In chapter 6, it stated that the vegetation was given to all animals, which would have meant that even carnivorous creatures would have been herbivorous then. But it wasn't until after the fall that, carnivorous creatures came into being. So, many people find it hard to believe that lions would have been eating plants. But you'll have to look this up. I don't know much about it, but there was a lion before that lived 11 years and ate nothing but plants, refused to eat meat. And I'll get into dinosaurs here in a little bit, but they would have been created on day 6 too. So keep that in mind. And we read that but for Adam no suitable helper was found. So after he named all the creatures on the ones that he was assigned the name, he found that he had no pair for himself, because God would have created male and female on the same day, each male and female kind. And so the Lord caused the man to fall asleep in a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs, and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord made a woman from the rib, and taken out of the man, and he brought forth to the man. The man said, "This is bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother, is united with his wife, and they became one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, for they felt no shame." And Genesis 3 talks about the fall of, where Satan tempts Eve to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good of evil. And, and then she convinced Adam to eat it. And then sin was brought forth in the world, and then that created the situation where we are now. The wicked world we live in. That would have been created then. And the day-age theory is, I don't think I mentioned the day-age theory. That's the belief that, each day encompasses millions and thousands of years. And, that one falls on its face whenever you read carefully. It says evening and morning. If they would have been like the days of creation, meaning that, like in the days of Abraham, they wouldn't have been assigned numbers, and they wouldn't have been assigned morning and evening, too. And a lot of people like to argue in favor of the theory of evolution. They like to try to fit it in with Genesis 1 through 2. And that fails also. We can get more in depth on, theistic evolution and everything that comes with it. But that'd be later on. And before the fall, there was no sin. Perfect world. Garden of Eden never got to just right. And the guy I mentioned earlier, Kent Ham, he'll go into more detail on the Garden of Eden and, and how life would have been like that for, life to exist without rainwater. And it would have involved, higher oxygen levels, and, he also explains how a man can be 969 years old in their world. Because you got to remember, Noah's world was very different from our world. And leave it at that. And another thing, a lot of people like to argue that, the creation account's it's not literal, it's figurative, and they like to, well, I'm going to go ahead and say this, I find it interesting that people like to come with the conclusion that it's figurative when the account is as plain as it gets, It's got no poetic elements to it really whatsoever. It pales in comparison to, Psalms and Job and Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, which is the wisdom literature, which is poetry, pure poetry, actually. And the Bible does have a lot of figured, it has metaphors and it's got a lot of figurative language, but with common sense, you should be able to, come to the conclusion that the creation week is a literal based on how plain it is. And, again, that's what the day age and the theistic evolutionists will argue. And the only real figurative thing that they point to is when a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they became one flesh. That was the first marriage between Adam and Eve, and Moses is also talking to the Israelites, because Genesis is one of the 5 books of the Torah, or the Jewish, scripture for the Jews. And it's pretty easy to figure out that he's talking about sexual relations whenever he's saying become one flesh. And you know, I ain't gonna get into specific details on that, but again, that that's the only kind of sort of things that's figurative, but you know, that's the only like that's the only one that's kind of figurative. The rest of it is as plain as it gets. And you know, and some of the most figurative literature in the Bible is the apocalyptic, you know, Revelation, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and Daniel. The apocalyptic books of the Bible, which have a lot of symbolism, and figurative language in it. So, and they're extremely hard to understand. About they're hard to understand because of it. But leave it at that. And I say to that, people like to argue saying that they're two contradicting accounts, but they're really not. They're not really at all. It's just chapter 2 focuses on Adam and Eve and their duties when it comes to the Garden of Eden, and how that they'll be the ones who take care of it, and it mentions and it, it mentions him naming the livestock and special seed bearing fruit that would have been used for food for Adam and Eve. And another interesting fact here: Adam, the Hebrew word for Adam, means man, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but here's a little scientific foreknowledge in the second chapter of the Bible that God took part of Adam's rib and made Eve. Well, the rib is actually the only bone that can actually regenerate or regrow. And that's probably why God took out his rib instead of, whatever other body part he would have used. Alright, and now I'm going to take time to talk about a few other things that go with Creation Week. And first I'd like to say that the word Brahman, the word kind is translated from the Hebrew word Brahman, which kind is associated with, family, the family within the taxonomy. Because, you got animal families like, canine and feline, and you got the elephant kind, and you got so on. And then within the kinds, you got the genuses, and then below that, you got species. But, depending on which order of taxonomy you're looking at, some have subfamily or subspecies, and they have tribe before family. Some do. And there is a field of science and creation science called Brahmanology. I don't know if I pronounced that right or not, but it's where they study created kinds, whatever they may be, and that's kind of a branch of creation zoology. And well, not just zoology, it encompasses plant kind too. And I'm going to mention dinosaurs now. You're probably used to hearing that dinosaurs millions of years ago roamed the earth and, all that. And 65 million years ago, they were wiped out by an asteroid that hit the earth. And, that's not the only theory of how the dinosaurs, went extinct. They go from that to even indigestion, that the air would have been contaminated with, toxic gas because of indigestion between, dinosaurs. And dinosaurs would have been created on day 6. You know, they're land creatures. And I'm going to go ahead and mention that pterosaurs or pterodactyls are not dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are all land-dwelling reptiles. And one thing that makes them distinct from other reptiles is that if you were to imagine a crocodile, for example, they're walking down a path. You know, their body is on the same level as their arms and their legs. But dinosaurs, or the best way to say that is, their bellies are on the ground, on the same level with their hands and legs. But dinosaurs are not like that at all. They're close to mammalian creatures when it comes to their belly not dragging on the ground, and that they're standing completely on their legs. And a lot of people push for the evolutionary theory. Now, I forgot to mention this. This also flies in the face of that, of the theistic evolution view. It's completely counter to the evolutionary theory in general, because it's thought that dry land would have been created before water. And, you can get onto, really it's just pure speculation of how the first cell evolved out of a complex broth of chemicals and that. And, you think of the Urey and the Miller experiment, where they would have tried to mimic the conditions of the Earth before, in its early being, 4.6 billion years ago, supposedly. And I can go more in depth on the Urey and Miller experiment, but I'll leave it at that for now. And another thing, dinosaurs lived with humans. That may be strange to most people to think that, because we're always taught that dinosaurs and humans are separated by millions upon millions of years, But if a good thing to remember is there is evidence of human and dinosaur coexisting with each other, and they exist as artifacts or cave paintings and so on. I'll leave a real good video on that touches on that in the description. So no, dinosaurs were not created millions of years apart from us humans and other land animals. And what else here? Let me think. Well, I guess that's it. That was me covering the Creation Week, Genesis 1 through 2. And in my little series, I'll be talking purely on, science and archaeology. I won't be talking about morality and and all of that, because I'm not good whenever it comes to specializing in those topics. And thank you for watching, and see you later.